Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Happy Thursday morning to you. Appreciate so very much you being with me. And we are taking a look at David Hester's 23 machine gun arguments that he offered during our just completed formal public debate that was held here in Ardmore July 14th through the 16th, 2016. You can watch the entirety of that debate on my website. Just go to eschatology.org or bibleprophecy.com, and it's right there at the very top of the page, the raw footage of Preter's Pilgrim Weekend 2016. Pardon me. As I just suggested, David Hester in his very first affirmative got up and in machine gun manner offered 23 arguments. They were mostly hypothetical syllogisms. If this is true, then that's true, etc. And those who have commented on that have commented he didn't prove one thing. He asserted, he claimed, but he did not do any exegesis. And look, as I've already noted in the first three examinations of his arguments, folks, if you don't actually exegete, if you don't draw out of the text what the text says, if you do not prove that what you think it says is the correct view, then guess what? You haven't proven your case. And that's the case with David Hester's point number 4. David Hester's point number 4 was, well, the second coming of Christ is literal. Christ has not come back literally, physically, bodily. Therefore, AD 70 doctrine is false. And David Hester made the observation, Christ came in the flesh when he was born of a virgin. He's going to come, quote, in like manner, a second time. The first time was in the flesh, second time has to be in the flesh. Well, I pointed out a couple of different times during the debate. Point number 1, David Hester completely, totally ignores the New Testament time statements about when Christ was going to come. Now, let me illustrate his problem here, okay? In Hebrews 9:28, which was his key text of appeal, by the way, that the second coming was literal. He will come again the second time. He appealed to John chapter 14. But his main passage of appeal was Hebrews 9:26 to 28. Well, by way of response, point number 1, I made an extensive argument on Hebrews chapter 9, 6 and following, all the way through verse 28, that Christ's high priestly actions in offering himself as a sacrifice, entering into the most holy place, and his second coming was to be the antitypical fulfillment of the old covenant high priest on the Day of Atonement. I pointed out that Hebrews chapter 10 verse 1 tells us that Christ had to come in order to fulfill the law, because the law was still, when Hebrews was written, a shadow of good things about to come. David Hester completely and totally ignored the argument. But if Christ had to come to fulfill the old law, that meant the old law had not been removed. That means David Hester was wrong in regard to the passing of the law. Point number 2, David Hester says that when man dies, he goes to Hades. Hebrews chapter 9 teaches that as long as man could not enter the most holy place, i.e. heaven, that the law of Moses remains in effect, because the law of Moses could not forgive sin. So David Hester says man cannot enter the most holy place today. Therefore, the law of Moses remains valid. Man does not have forgiveness today. How did David Hester respond? In utter, abject debate, conversion, and total desperation, he gets up and says, we have access to the most holy place today. Oh, wait a minute. That's a direct contradiction to his written statement that we do not go to the most holy place today when we die as Christians. So here we have David Hester saying, no, The Christian goes to Hades, Abraham's bosom, when they die. But when pressed with the logical implications of what Hebrews chapter 9 actually says, David Hester gets up and says, no, we have access. When I pointed out his absolute self-contradiction, he never said another word about the most holy place and Hades and entrance. Point number 3. David Hester says, we have today the full benefit of the atonement. Those are his words. But wait a minute. I pointed out from Leviticus 9:22 that there were no blessings of any sacrifice that were bestowed on the people until the high priest came out of the most holy place, out of the temple. That means that the blessings of the atonement could not be given until Christ would come again the second time. Therefore, for David Hester to affirm we have the full benefit of the atonement today demands that Christ has come again the second time. David Hester's response? Not one word. Point number 4. I pointed out that the coming of the Lord of Hebrews 9:28, which David Hester says has to be the second coming. Well, it is the, quote, second coming. It's the second appearing. But Hebrews chapter 10, 30 through 37, actually verse 38 and 39, says that Christ was coming, number 1, in fulfillment of the law of the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32, which was about Israel's last days, not the end of time. And number 2, I pointed out that the writer of Hebrews says, in a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. So whatever the coming of the Lord of Hebrews 9:28 was, guess what? The New Testament writer in Hebrews affirmed it was coming in a very, very little while and would not delay. David Hester's response to Hebrews chapter 10? Not one word. Now, folks, if you want to understand the nature of the coming of the Lord, let me recommend that you go to my website, eschatology.org, BibleProphecy.com, and you order my book, Like Father, Like Son, on Clouds of Glory. This book has been called the definitive definition of the second coming of Christ by Bible professors. Okay? So, go to my website, once again, eschatology.org or BibleProphecy.com. Order the book, Like Father, Like Son, on Clouds of Glory. Say that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. That'll save you almost $5. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Next week, beginning on Monday, we will continue our examination and total refutation of David Hester's 23 so-called arguments. You don't want to miss it. You be safe. We'll see you on Monday.